What's up, guys? We are back with another McFarlane Toys Spawn review, and we're taking a look at just the most ridiculously oversized figure. We knew this guy was going to be big, and I mean, it makes sense that he's big, but VIOLATOR is freakishly large. This thing is absolutely massive. It weighs a few pounds, as best I can tell, and yeah, there's just a lot of really gnarly, chunky figure going on here. So this guy does come in sort of a similar style box that the Spawn figures, like the actual Spawn figures, are coming in for this particular wave. But he's, of course, I mean, massive. This thing is bigger than my head. So it's like got a black motif. You've got the Spawn logo down there. He's in this huge, huge window. So if you keep him in the box by chance, he's still going to display pretty good. And then you've got some comic artwork here on the side panel. And then the back has got this monstrous shot of VIOLATOR. But honestly, you don't really need this because he's basically doing the exact same thing there, but it's still a pretty cool presentation. I'm not the biggest fan of the boxes that the Spawn figures themselves are coming in, but this box, for this guy at least, does look pretty cool. So as far as presentation goes, it's pretty nice. But let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our VIOLATOR figure. And this thing is ridiculous in pretty much every way. So this guy is, of course, a larger figure. I mean, he's huge. He's a more expensive figure, 50 bucks, but I'm not convinced that you're not getting your money's worth on this, especially when you think about, you know, what you might get elsewhere for $50. This guy is a lot of toy, a lot of plastic. It's incredibly heavy. And there's just a lot going on here. It is limited in some ways, obviously, being this big, being this weird of a design, because he's an odd creature, right? Especially in the form that they've given him. He can't be as dynamic as maybe you want him to be, but he's going to have some shelf presence for sure. So let's see what this guy can do, see how he moves around. He moves a little bit better than I thought, but he's still not like super dynamic or anything like that. So the head is in particular like really locked down. Like it really doesn't do anything. It's a separate piece, obviously, but it doesn't really do anything. The jaw does move though, and it'll kind of like bobble in there, but it doesn't really want to do anything. So there's a little bit of shimmy room, but that's about it. And you can kind of hear he's like really... He sounds really rubbery, if that's the best way to say it, because there's like overlays on the figure and he's got like the diaper thing going on. The joints are, I want to say tight, but not in a negative way. This guy needs to have tight joints. He doesn't need to be loose in any way or he's going to come crashing down and destroy your entire display. So he is pretty solid. You are going to have to play the balance game, but it's not too bad. Arms go about that far out at the shoulders. You can see they're kind of tight, it's kind of fighting me. They do rotate all the way around. We've got our single jointed elbow, but it's kind of a deep cut, so it gives you full 90. And then you've got rotation there. And then you've got hinges at the wrist, which are like super massive. I mean, they're this thick. So they go all the way down and then out. And then, of course, they rotate as well. There's a lot of resistance on some of these joints. As far as the torso goes, you can get him to tilt a little to the side, a little bit forwards and backwards. If you can hear me over that squeaking. And then, of course, he rotates as well. So you've got like a diaphragm cut right there. And then you've got a waist twist. Legs are pretty normal for a McFarlane figure, so they go out about this far. They kick forward only about that far. He has the diaper thing going on. They do kick backwards slightly. There, of course, is not a thigh cut there, so you can't really rotate him either. Not out of the box. You'd have to modify him. Knees are pretty good. Single joint. Let's move that arm out of the way. Single jointed knee, but it's a solid deep cut, so I do like that. And you can rotate, you can shimmy that knee down there. He is kind of like one of those digitigrade kind of characters, so he sort of stands on his toes, but he has a really big footprint. You've got like the second ankle right there, so it gives you some really good range. And then he does have his actual ankle right here, so the ankle will go in and out. And then he does have a slight rocker. It goes out a little bit better than it goes in because he's got this sort of like dew claw thing down here like a dog has. So out really far actually. And then in it's still pretty good. And like I said, he is incredibly heavy, but these joints are all ratcheted. So he stands pretty well. Like once you get him, he's not really going to go anywhere. I say that as he's probably about to come crashing down, but he does stand pretty nicely. You just have to sort of, you know, play the balance game. He has essentially all the articulation I kind of expected, but he is still a little bit limited, just based on his design. I don't think they really constructed him in such a way that he's outright limited because of their joints. I think he just has sort of a weird design and setup, specifically around the knees, around the ankles, and then his head in particular, because it's got to fit into this like socket that's jutting out of his chest. So there's probably not a lot of wiggle room there anyway, so at least we do get the jaw. Of course, he looks really weird when you shut it, but at least something moves. I just wish there was a little bit more head action there. Otherwise, I think he moves pretty well. The only area that I truly wish, again, was a little bit more robust is the head. You know, he does have the horns. They stop him from pivoting side to side too. So there's just a lot of stuff that kind of gets in the way. Otherwise, though, not bad at all. I'll go out on a limb, though, and say that there's a pretty good chance that you're probably mostly interested in this particular version of Violator, this particular figure, because of the size, maybe, because of how he looks, because of the shelf presence, because he is going to be limited, but a figure of this size is often limited anyway. It's not unique to this guy. I mean, he's absolutely enormous, and I'll definitely do some size comparisons here in a minute. But the overall presence of this figure just comes from its design, from its crazy sculpt, the amount of paint that this guy has on it, and it is a testament in many ways to what McFarlane Toys is kind of known for, I suppose, in that the figures, at least, you know, maybe in the old days of McFarlane Toys, and of course it still rings true on a lot of figures now for them, they are beyond loaded with sculpt. Just everything has texture to it. Everything's got something sticking out of it, or something oozing off of it, or some nastiness on it. And Violator is a pretty good example of that in like the modern era. So, you know, this guy has got this crazy, like rocky, craggy texture all over him. Tons of paint, tons of wash, but all of the sculpt has something to it. Like even his spine back here that sticks out, it's not just bones, there's little pits and cracks and gouges in it. And then of course it's all filled with that wash as well. So there's a lot to this figure. Again, this is maybe a little bit of a specific design for Violator. I know a lot of people really were, I guess, maybe hoping that he was the thinner, wispier, kind of spindly Violator. But I really like this from a toy perspective, from how he's going to look on a shelf, especially when he's next to the other figures in this line, when he's next to Clown, for example, because Clown is a big, ridiculous figure in its own kind of miserable way almost. Violator is in a league of its own. He's bigger, he's big in a different way. So this wave gives you a real variety of shapes and sizes when it comes to figures, and I think they really just knocked him out of the park. Again, you're paying a lot extra for this figure in comparison to the rest of the line, but I do think you're getting a lot out of it. He has tons of detail all over him. You know, you've even got paint kind of like oozing in the mouth. There's like a glossiness to it to make it look like he's, you know, salivating. He's got those gnarly teeth. You've got those sort of honeycomb red eyes that sit up there. And it's just a nice looking figure despite how ridiculous and ugly this thing actually is. I think they absolutely killed it when it comes to cramming as much detail, literally as much detail as possible into every surface on this figure, and then covering it with varying layers of, I don't know, various grays and like browns and blacks and stuff to make him look all disgusting and rocky and craggy and demonic and monstrous. And I'm really happy with the finished product here. He is a kind of a beast when it comes to handling him and moving him around in some respects. He's still surprisingly well articulated, but it's all about this. Him being able to stand there very squarely and just be imposing and look fantastic and have a ton of detail. And this guy's going to be a focal point on your shelf. He's certainly going to draw attention away from other figures just because he's so big, but then there's a lot to see here, from all the spikes that run up and down his legs and arms. You know, he's got them all over his thighs, the huge horns, and you know, this big like crown horn that sticks out of his head up there. I mean, that thing's ridiculous on its own. So there's a lot to sort of soak in on this figure. I think they really did a solid job on this. When it comes to the aesthetics, he is dripping with detail. And then as far as size comparisons, we're going to start off just by throwing a bunch of big stuff at this guy. So we've got the recent NECA Chrome Dome over here, which, you know, I was touting as being a humongous figure. And they're fairly comparable in terms of height, but there is a lot more figure when it comes to Violator. And then here we go with a Marvel Legends Red Hulk to give you an idea of what a Build-A-Figure-y kind of figure looks like alongside of him. Let's take him away and let's do a NECA Super Shredder, because that's also a really, really large figure. So here he is with the recent Euro Tribute Super Shredder, and he looks small by comparison here. Let's throw something in front of him for some other scale. So here he is with a Mythic Legions figure. So here is an Orc Builder, and you can see that he is outright dwarfed by comparison. Here he is with a Black Series. So here he is with the Boba Fett, the Deluxe Fett Man. I mean, they come up to basically the bottom of his jaw when his mouth is outstretched entirely. And then here he is with the Mortal Kombat Spawn. So he comes up to the bottom of his upper jaw. And then here's a Plunderling, just because a small guy. You can see he comes up to about his hand. And then how about a Motu Origins figure for another smaller but not as small kind of figure. So here's Trapjaw, and he comes up to about the bottom of the wrist. So yeah, I mean, this guy's huge. He's like 10, 11 inches tall, but he's incredibly thick and beefy, and there's just, again, there's a ton of plastic here. I can't stress enough how big and how much this guy weighs. I mean, he weighs a few pounds, so there's a lot of plastic here. He's a big monster of a figure, no pun intended, and he's gonna take up a lot of real estate in your display, but he's going to look really good doing it too. And you really just get all the figure because there's no accessories to speak of in this guy. Well, unless you count this, you get one of these stupid stands too, which this has to be a joke, right? This can't even begin to help him stand up, really. You don't really need it as far as I can tell, but he doesn't come with anything. What you see is what you get on this guy. But I think when you see him in comparison to other figures and you see exactly how big he is and how he's going to scale alongside Spawn and other lines, it's a really good indicator for just how much bang for your buck you're getting on this guy. So yeah, overall, Violator is a pretty solid figure. I mean, no pun intended, I suppose. This is, again, a $50 figure, but I think you're getting your money's worth in many ways. He is surprisingly well articulated. Granted, there are some hindrances and limitations, but again, crazy design, big monster figure, not to be unexpected, really. But he looks amazing. He's humongous. And it just works. Like, this is a big monster figure. Even if you don't really care about Spawn stuff, this guy might just work as a big generic demon to throw on your shelf and be a huge focal point because, again, he's huge. He's enormous. He's heavy. He's covered in detail. The sculpt is insane on this guy, and he's got tons of paint, too. So there's a lot to appreciate on this guy. So that's going to do it for this look at the McFarlane Toys Violator. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.